This morning, I don't know anybody here. I don't really believe in Bible bingo. You know, where you open a passage up and think, "Oh, wow, that's relevant for me today." But I was in the service this morning, and I realised I needed to read a psalm one. I hadn't got one ready, so I just opened it up, and this one came up, and you'll realise why this is important later on. But this is Psalm 30. Sing to the Lord, you saints. Praise his holy name, for his anger lasts only a moment, but his favour lasts a lifetime. Weeping may remain for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning, or joy comes in the morning. I just kind of leapt out at me, that one, by mistake, really. But you'll see why that's important, as I say, later on. But here we are in Genesis. If you want to turn to Genesis chapter 9, I'm just going to read just a few verses to begin with. This is from verse 1. Then God blessed Noah and blessed his sons, saying, "Be fruitful, increase in number, and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall upon all the beasts of the air, and all the birds of the air, upon every creature that moves along the ground, and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it." There we are, verses 1 to 4. So let's have a look at it and see what this might mean to us. But I want to start with a story. We'll start with a story about a woman called Alice Johnson. And Alice is a single mother of 5, and she's from Memphis in Tennessee. And one day she lost her job, and from then on things got worse and worse and worse. She lost her home, her youngest son was killed in a motorbike accident, and she panicked. And to make ends meet, she made a terrible mistake. She started helping a drug trafficking gang. And inevitably, she got caught and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Can you imagine that? For her first ever offense. And Alice realized that she needed to change her life. So if a second chance ever came her way, she'd be ready for it. She never ever gave up hope of reuniting her family. And while in prison, she worked. She changed her life. She became an ordained minister. She became a mentor for other women who were in prison. And after 21 years, President Trump gave her second chance. And he commuted Alice's sentence just last June. And she's now using her second chance to be with her family, to tell her story through her work as a speaker, as a writer, and really just going around the country explaining her life. And it's a lovely story, isn't it? An amazing story. And can you imagine yourself in that situation? Can you? Stuck in prison for decades. And lockdown's been bad enough, hasn't it? Just for a year. Just because of one stupid mistake. Yes, of course, you've got to pay the price for your mistakes, but I bet you would hope and pray for a second chance. You probably think you deserved a second chance. But you know what? I think everyone deserves a second chance. No matter what they've done. That's what God thought about the human race. You see, we'd stuffed it up. We got it wrong, made stupid mistakes, gone running after these gorgeous heavenly angels rather than our own wives and husbands. And God needed to do something about this. This is all what we talked about a few weeks ago, wasn't it? And God needed to start again, so he sent the flood. Everyone was evil, everyone, except just one family, and they were the ones who were saved. So here we are, we start again. Noah is in exactly the situation that Adam was. A world clean and pure and bright, just like, it's falling snow when you get up in the morning and there's snow everywhere, it's gorgeous and white. That's the world that Adam had. And God gives humanity its second chance. Now that's one of the major themes of this passage, second chances. But there's another message too. And within this story, there are valuable lessons for our spiritual life, as well as the second chance business. And it teaches us about our spiritual life and about our walk with God. So let's dive in, shall we? But as we do this, just remember one really important thing. During this whole passage that I read out and a bit further on, it's all about God. It's all about God's grace. He's the only one who speaks. He's the only one who acts. Noah doesn't say or do anything. God is the subject. He does everything. And he begins with the blessing And he begins with a command. Then God blessed Noah and blessed his sons, saying to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth." It's the same command that was given to Adam and Eve in Genesis 1:28. Go and colonize the earth. At the very beginning, water covered the face of the earth. Second time round, the same thing has happened. And then the flood receded. It's a second chance for humanity. The first time around, Adam was to become the father of all peoples. Now it's Noah's turn. He is to become the patriarch of all humanity. Adam, as we know, was the original father of everyone. It didn't take very long for humanity to cover the earth. The be fruitful and multiply thing. I think they're probably quite enthusiastic about the whole thing. And it all kind of sorted itself out. And then 1,656 years later, Adam's 8 times grandson and his family are the only ones left. And it's time to start again. And actually, it's the same story over again, but there are a few really crucial differences. Firstly, sin has already entered the world by this point, and God knows that Noah is not going to be sinless. In fact, the first thing Noah does when he gets out of the ark is to plant a vineyard. What a man. As soon as the wine is ready, he gets absolutely, completely bladdered. Steaming drunk, he's rolling around naked on the floor. Mind you, if I was in the same situation, I might do the same. Because up until then, you see, the world was vegetarian. God only gives human beings the right to eat meat after the flood. He says this, "Every creature that moves along the ground and upon all the fish of the sea, they are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you green plants, I now give you everything." That's 9:2-3. So Noah has a vineyard, he's got plenty of wine, and he's just been told he can have the very first ever burger. So Noah, the man who walks with God for 600 years, commits his very first sin at the very first ever barbecue. And that is why, boys and girls, that's why we don't have beach barbecues in England on Christmas Day like the Australians do. It's got nothing to do with the weather. It's all about sin. But there's something really important here that we can learn about sin. You see, God will not be defeated. God will not be defeated by human sin, neither before the flood nor after the flood. He will not be defeated. No evil done by humanity can frustrate the plans of God. This is really encouraging because it gives us hope that when we've messed up completely, there will always be a second chance. In fact, not just second chance, not just a third chance. But I tell you, says Jesus, not 7 times, but 70 times, 7 times. 77 chances, you name it. Chance after chance. You see, God knew that Noah was going to sin. He knew it already. Because Genesis 6:5 tells us that the inclination of all of us is to sin and do evil. That's why God destroyed the earth in the first place, wasn't it? Noah was tainted by that desire too. But even though God knew that, God still promised not to destroy the earth once again. He put the rainbow in the sky, and then just a short time later, just afterwards, there was Noah, paralytic on the floor. God knows what we're like, you know, yet he still loves us. So no matter what you may think about yourself, no matter how bad you are, there is always hope. We sang that song, Our Good, Good Father, and it's relevant. It really means that. And if you don't believe what it says, and if you don't believe that there's always hope, then I'm afraid you are wrong. And you don't know much about the God that we worship. Let the wicked turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him. I will freely pardon. Isaiah 55, verse 7. There is always, always, always a second chance, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. And God gave Noah a second chance. And he allowed him to eat meat, and he allowed him to go to McDonald's. But he also gave him a new command as well. He said, "You must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. I will demand an accounting of every animal. I pondered that verse. I really pondered. I read a lot about it, and I thought, what does that mean? I will demand an accounting of every animal. What's this about the blood business? And there's a fantastic organization run by Ray Pritchard called Keep Believing, which really wrestles with these things. And he came up with this amazing idea that it's all about life. This verse is all about life. See, God's starting all over again, and he's setting down how things are going to be. This is serious now. There are rules, Noah, says God. Follow them. And you can sum these rules up in 3 words. Respect all life. Everything flows from that. But you see, in the Old Testament, life is blood. It's the pulse of life. When blood is poured out, life is poured out. Humanity can eat flesh, but it can't eat life. Life is precious. Blood is precious. Blood was a sign of mercy for Israel in the Passover. Remember they put it on the door? Blood sealed God's covenant with Israel. We find in Exodus 24. Blood was the atonement for God's people. Exodus 30. And Jesus said that his blood sealed the new covenant at the very first communion. And in Revelations 12:11, it tells us that blood enables us to overcome the devil. Jesus poured out his blood on the cross. The blood of the Lamb means salvation for all who accept him. And God is telling Noah, eat what you like. Eat of any tree, but life belongs to me. Your life, every person's life, your life at home, everyone's life belongs to me, says God. There were rules. Adam was not allowed to eat of the tree of knowledge, and Noah is not allowed to consume life. There are rules, Noah. Respect all life. It belongs to God. Only God can allow a person's blood to be spilled. Blood is life, and the blood of God shed by Jesus brings life to everyone. Respect life, Noah. So that's a lesson that Noah had to learn. And once he got that, then God gives his promise. Now, God made the first covenant with Adam all those years ago, and he broke it. The covenant was, do what you like, but don't eat that tree. Or eat the apple of the tree. You could eat the tree if you wanted to, but not the fruit. That's a bit of the Bible that's not normally there. But Adam broke it by eating the fruit of the tree, as we know. And now God is going to make another covenant with Noah and with the whole of humanity. Now, God's covenants, you have to get your head around what they are, because they are not agreements. God imposes his covenants on us. Not the kind of thing we do these days. We don't tell people these days, do we? We want an agreement, but God just says this is how it's going to be. But it isn't cruel or dominating, because it's gracious. God doesn't have to do anything, but he chooses. He chooses to give us a covenant and give us a way of life that allows him to be gracious. He chooses to give us a way of life that allows him to be gracious. And it's an unconditional covenant, this one. There's no conditions attached at all. God doesn't say, if you obey me, I promise never to flood the earth again. He doesn't ask anything for the human race at all. No obedience, no sacrifice, no faith, no prayer, nothing at all. This isn't do something and then God does something in return. This is just a promise made by God. God's destroyed the world, and he knows full well that we are going to ruin it all again. Just look what we've done. He knew that. This is a covenant of pure grace, made despite human sin, not because of any supposed human goodness or human faith or human obedience. Despite our continuing sin, God promises never again to destroy the entire human race with a flood. It is grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. We don't deserve it, but God does it anyway. We didn't deserve Jesus, but God sent him anyway. We don't deserve to have our sins forgiven, washed by the blood of the Lamb, but God does it anyway. And God seals his second covenant with a sign, a rainbow. I don't know about you, but I love rainbows. I'm a sucker for rainbows. When you see a rainbow, what's the first thing you want to do? I bet you want to share it, don't you? You say, look at that. You want to tell people about it. Because rainbows are amazing. They have every color, every full spectrum, all possible shades. What an amazing sign for the whole of humanity. Every human being of every race and every tribe. But you know, the rainbow isn't for us. It's got nothing to do with us at all. It's for God. This covenant is not about you and me. It's about God. Whenever the rainbow appears in the sky, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. See, God is promising himself. He's promising himself that he will honor his promise. We are at his mercy, yet he is gracious. What a powerful message for our spiritual lives. Just get that, eh? Just get that. We are totally, utterly, and completely powerless before God. We are infinitesimally small and insignificant before him. We should fear him. We should be terrified of him. And do you know what we should do? We should fear him. Don't forget that. He is awesome beyond our understanding. And don't ever make the mistake of thinking that you understand God or thinking that you can bargain with him. That is not your place. But that isn't the whole story, as we know, because surrounding God is grace. Grace and love and concern and love and grace and love and concern. And that's the message for your spiritual life. You need to understand the terrifying power and majestic awesomeness of God. Moses was told that just to catch a glimpse of him would kill him. How frightening is that? This is your God. That's what he is. Unknowable and beyond your wildest dreams. And yes, of course, he can be daddy sometimes. But only because he chooses to be, when he chooses to be. Get that bit right. Understand his majesty. And then, only then can you approach the throne. You don't just saunter up to God's throne whistling. You crawl on your knees. I love that part in O Holy Night when it says, fall on your knees. Fall on your knees. Fall on your knees. And hear the angel voices. At the very whisper of God, you bow. At the name of Jesus, every knee will bow. When you understand that, then you can approach his throne in total humility, trusting in his infinite grace. Then you can walk in his presence. What an honor that is. Trusting in his love. You can walk with him. As long as you understand you do this on his terms, not yours. When we see a rainbow, the message to us is God promised never again to flood the entire world. But when God sees the rainbow, he's reminding himself of the promise he made to us in grace and in love. We can walk in the grace of God. But we can only walk with God because he chooses to let us. Your spiritual life is your walk with God. And my guess is that your walk is going to have its mountains to climb and its rivers to cross too. And the walk of life is not an easy one. Dire Straits knew that. And walking with God is not easy either. But what an amazing journey. The rainbow teaches us so much about our walk with God, our spiritual journey, because you see, rainbows come during and after the rain, not before. Now, Psalm 30, verse 5, you see why I was quite keen to get this one, says this, weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Things can and will be tough, but there is always hope. There's always a second chance. But God's promise is more than just don't worry. Don't worry, things will get better. Paul says in Romans 8 that all things work together for good. And that is all things, all things. And it really does mean all things. Anger, unanswered questions, frustrations, tears, and yes, fear. These are part of your journey. You can't have an omelette, so the saying goes, without cracking the egg. You can't have Easter without Good Friday. And you can't walk with God without going through some really tough bits. They're part of it. They're not just things that get in the way. They're an essential part of the journey, and they allow God to show you grace. Isaiah 30, verses 29 and 30, I think they sum this up just beautifully. Just listen to this. God will surely be gracious to you at the sound of your cry. As soon as he hears it, he answers you. And though the Lord may give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, your teacher will not hide himself anymore. Your eyes will see the teacher, and your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Can you imagine that? Just someone's behind you, tapping on the shoulder, say, come on, come on, come on. This is the way, come on, walk in it. Walk with me, come with me. This is the way, walk in it. Walk the spiritual path of Jesus, knowing that the God of awesome power has decided to show you beautiful and wonderful grace. If and when you fail, he will always give you a second chance to join that path again. Walk humbly with him, our God, knowing that everything is on his terms. And when it gets tough, remember that the challenges that you face are not just accidents, they're part of your journey. Trust in him. Trust in his covenant. Trust in the blood of Jesus. Trust in the grace and the love of God. And yes, weeping may endure for a night, but through his grace, joy comes in the morning.